Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career.
Today on the podcast, I have Paul Klein. Paul is a business consultant and entrepreneur. He helps consultants, freelancers, and solopreneurs stop undercharging so that they can get paid what their work is really worth. Paul has consulted and worked with numerous national and international brands, including Target, Slack, UC Berkeley, Holiday Inn, KFC, Taco Bell, JCPenney, and more. He's also the host of the Pricing is Positioning podcast, one of my personal favorites, where he discusses how you price is a direct reflection of your brand's position and value in the marketplace. It's just not a matter of charging more or raising your rates. Rather, it's recognizing the circumstances around your products and services and then positioning for maximum value for you and your clients. Cool. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being on, man.
Glad to be here, Arul. This is great. Looking forward to our conversation today.
I'm really excited for our conversation today because pricing comes down to one of the fundamental things within business. And I know that when I've helped clients, looking back now, I've always either increased price, doubled or tripled ethically, but it's always something cool to see like your main focus on how to do that strategically. And before we go into like a lot of the methodologies, I kind of want to read you something from Seth Godin's blog that I thought I should bring up on this podcast. And I'd love to get your insights in it. So I'll be a quick snippet here. So for most products and services, we rate them on a curve. Of course, the seat on the discount airline was cramped. It's okay because it was cheap. And of course, this Camry doesn't look or ride like a Porsche. Don't be stupid. But on the opposite is true on the high end. When luxury goods are compared to luxury goods, the narrative, if this one must be better than another, in an absolute and relative terms, precisely because it's more expensive. So hiring a McKinsey costs 10x more than hiring a former McKinsey consultant, and so it's worth more. So I'd love to get your thoughts around how pricing accordingly and relative value and how like the inverse psychology of that works.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, Seth's the man. so he always has so much better eloquent ways of explaining things and so forth. But it really comes down to it's real relative. And also, no matter how you carve everything up, whether you call yourself a Lexus, a Porsche, or a Corolla, where you are on the spectrum in your vertical and everything, the one thing I always try to remind people, and you said it kind of earlier about being ethical, at the end of the day, it's all about your price. The value to your clients can't exceed your price. So you're never going to have a situation where your price was way up high and then the value was real low. I mean, if you do, you're going to have a very unhappy customer. So it's all about just making sure that the value that you're giving to your clients always exceeds the price you're charging. And then whether you're, again, at that Porsche level or Lexus level versus a Corolla, it's the same principle. So once you understand that and can really be okay with charging more, because like you say, a lot of times us business owners, and there's just this negative connotation with, I'm getting over on people, I'm taking advantage of them because I'm charging more. And that's really not the case. It's really all about that value exchange. You're providing a great service and product to your clients, and in return, they're giving you certificates of appreciation, as Rabbi Lapin says in the great book, Thou Shalt Prosper. So, it's all about really honing in on that and looking at it that way. Then once you exceed the value for the price you're charging to your clients, then it's about positioning yourself away from being regarded as a commodity and more into that Lexus and that Bentley, more of a high-end role, high ticket consultant. And that's definitely more art than strategy.
I love how you mentioned that. Before we get to the positioning, because that is a lot, I do want to tell you a story that for our listeners as well, when I priced too low, and I'm going to be honest with you, the people in that meeting were like, whoa, wait, what do you mean? Like, we're expecting this level. That doesn't seem like the right price. And they were generous enough, to my benefit, to tell me that's insanely too low. So we worked to the higher pricing tier that I had as an option, but based on the perception or the value that I thought they were wanting to get out of our engagement, a certain price point would have fit. But thankfully, they saw, no, we actually want more value. And it's interesting because they were thankful for the higher price. And again, that's the perception.
Yeah. And they also recognize that it would be irresponsible for their company to hire someone at that low rate. It's like they understand the value, and you did really well by positioning yourself that way. So they already had in their mind a much higher value proposition in their mind. And unfortunately, sometimes we sell to our own wallet, and we want to get the job. So we come in at those lower rates when we're not really we really need to be thinking about what is it, what is the value to our clients? What is it in their eyes, not our eyes? We may barely be scrapping by and driving a Corolla still, and they're driving, the Bentleys and we're serving that market segment. And we really got to look at it from that perspective. And the good thing is that particular client is a good client because they recognize that, and they said, hey, we really like you, and they're still going to get a great value in their mind. But they know what it takes, and they want you to be successful, because if you're successful, they're going to be successful. And that's what it's all about, creating that win-win for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes down to like the 4 P's in marketing, and price being that pillar point. So once you get like the product right, if you're doing production or manufacturing, you get all these pieces right, and you're able to tell the story. Now it comes down to the perception that you want others to feel about you. Because again, when it comes to sales, especially in high ticket consulting, it's all about that transference of emotion and making sure that you're solving that emotion, and they're not buying what you do. They're buying the solution to their emotional state, which is all translated and perceived through price. Let's talk about how pricing is your positioning.
Yeah, we kind of hit on it, but it's the old story. My friend Ken Davis, when he started transitioning from faith-based speaking in churches and youth groups to professional speaking, he got his first call from a corporate event. They wanted him to be their keynote speaker. He had been doing speaking for a while. Was really regarded as a really good speaker. And they said, yeah, we really want to have you for our corporate event. It's the annual business meeting. Going to be a lot of people there. We want it to be really good. You're really good. What would you charge? And he was like, $1,500. And they're like, we're sorry, we only hire professionals. Hung up on him. And he clearly positioned his pricing much kind of similar to what you did, way far away from his positioning. And again, I'm more, my niche is more with knowledge workers, consultants, people selling their mind as opposed to physical products. And there's that's kind of like 2 big different areas or disciplines. It's like if you're selling widgets and t-shirts and physical products, in retail, there's kind of an art form to that versus, for consultants and high ticket consultants, that many in your crowd are or strive to be. And that's where you can really strive in that position or struggle with that, because a lot of times what we do, again, we are so eager to get the client. We lowball or we anchor low, by throwing that, well, I would just want to get the job. This is a big client. And I did that early on in my career too, Raul, as you may have heard me speak before on some of my courses and in my podcast about a big Fortune 500 client. And I flew to Minneapolis. I was like, on this guy, taking him to dinner, steaks, wine, all that stuff. And he kept working me down. And because I was just regarded as a commodity, I was not positioned as that expert. And I allowed that to happen. And now if that same conversation happens 10 years later, I know how to play that what is it? Word judo or whatever,
Or
it's like,
judo.
it's like, it is all about that positioning and sometimes you have to, it's the least interested principle. You have to have that, even if you're starving, you're like, man, I need this job or I'm not going to pay my mortgage. You still got to be able to walk away and say no. Cause if you don't, you're going to take that one, then you're going to take another one. And it's that slippery slope. It's like going in debt. You get that one credit card. Next thing you know, you're 50 grand in debt. It's a slippery slope. So you've got to really, try, really be disciplined in your prospecting. And that's why when you are going into consulting, if you're not doing it full time yet, and maybe you got your side hustling or side gigging, get that boat a little bit closer to the dock before you leave that day job. You have the day job as your stability, or retirement or a severance or something like that. But as you're bidding those projects and you're building up your side gig, say no. You've got to be able to say no. Put yourself up at that higher level. Once you get a good funnel going, then you can jump in and go all in. And now you've positioned yourself, and you're not just taking every job that comes along.
It's really important. But as a side note, like, I got a buddy who does judo, so you just throw people around. So it's really interesting to have like those types of conversations. But how would you go about in regards to like, how do we position ourselves at that level? Because I know that we just talked about almost like the state of mind that we have to be in is being okay with saying no to a certain deal, even though that deal is the biggest thing that we've seen so far, or that it's, a huge opportunity for us, but it's not the right opportunity or the opportunity that we want to be working in. So that's the first stage, is obviously developing that mindset to be strong and just making sure that we stick to the course, like we mentioned. But then what were the actual action items to look towards positioning ourselves to be able not only to not demand those prices, but be able to justify those prices and feel confident? Because it always goes back to the individual not feeling confident or happy with what they're doing. What are some of those action items that you see would be a common trait based on the work that you've done?
Yeah. First off is that mindset. If you don't have the mindset, like you said, you're never going to get it. You're always going to be sabotaging yourself. And, our friend John Nemo talks about the psycho-cybernetics and, your automatic rudder that's kind of taking you in a direction, whether it's in success, life, relationships. The same thing happens with our pricing. If in the back of your mind, you don't feel you're worthy, you'll sabotage it. You won't send that extra email. You won't put that proposal out. And so that's where it's really got to start. And that's why I really advocate using the 3 options, because that allows us to experiment a little bit with our proposals and pushing the envelope a little bit. You can throw in that Bentley, that first class ticket for your services without feeling icky, because you got 2 lower options that might be closer to the client's budget or where you feel comfortable. And so what I'll say is use that 3 pricing option proposal, make your feel good, like where you think you would be with the client as your low option, and then throw in those 2 hires just to kind of stretch yourself. And if they feel a little bit scary, then you're in the right spot. And that'll stretch you a little bit, and you will be so surprised what happens when you do that. And then clients will take those higher options, and it's just like, whoa, I didn't think I was worth it, even though you kind of had that bravado, or you kind of played like you did, as you're working with the client. But that's why you don't give single price options, single proposals with just one price for that exact reason. And then beyond mindset, I mean, just, you got to have, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an easy way or a good story to explain it. But I mean, you as you're moving up the value ladder, I talk about using yes, no pricing. And, there's those times when your pricing is maybe not where you want it to be. You're not quite there. So but you're getting a lot of work, and all of a sudden you find yourself very busy and almost having troubles keeping up. And that's a great time to push the pricing envelope a little bit. So that's why I say, okay, when you're really busy and you're having troubles keeping up, don't say no to a job, price them to no. And what that'll do is that'll allow them to, and that's why I call it yes, no pricing. And that's where you're saying yes, when you need the work, sometimes, and you're trying to develop the funnel. And then when you get really busy and you're overwhelmed, or you don't have a lot of margin, that's a great time to start raising those prices. instead of telling them, no, I'm too busy, just say, yeah, I can bid the job. But for me to do that, I got to bring in another team member. I got to bring in another or more resources. So now instead of that being a $5,800 job, now it's a $12,500 job or a $15,500 job. And if they take it, great. If not, you're so busy, so you've got plenty of other work. And that's another great way to help position you up that value ladder in your consultancy.
I love it because it goes back to options, giving the client or the prospect the opportunity to work with you, and not saying like, this is either going to work or it's not going to work. It's saying, with both in the frame of mind of saying, we're going to work together. Let's find a path to doing so. And then giving them those options, making it, I love the 3 pricing model, because it makes it easier for them to understand what kind of level of service do I want? What's the option do I want? And even if you see like, I got an oil change this weekend, right? And they give you the same thing. You want this, the platinum premium will even make your car sing, or you just want the basic oil change. So it's even at that minute level, like that very basic core fundamental essential like job level, all the way to like high end tech and consulting, where it's, tens of thousands or even half, like 50 plus, I don't know, $500,000 deals. It's being able to get. Sorry,
I've used it on high 6-figure, multiple 6-figure, I'll have a 650, a 450 and a 350 or a 250, or, you know what I mean? I've used it all the way down to little 4-figure jobs too. And it's the same. The principle's the same. It just has more zeros on it. So, and it's a great thing, as you pointed out, Raul, that the great thing about using options is it really empowers your clients, which is what they want. They really want to feel that way. And what happens is when you give them one pricing option or one price in a proposal, you're basically giving them, in their eyes, what's like an ultimatum. And, Ron Baker says this best. He says, when you give that single price option, it is like giving them, your clients, an ultimatum. And so what we want to do is use those pricing options, because then it shifts the value proposition in your client's mind from not if we're going to work with Raul, but how we're going to work with Raul. And so we're using those, and because they have those pricing options, they're comparing the options and the value proposition in their mind with your current proposal that you have with them, instead of comparing it to a consultant, your competition, basically. So it really has us, and this isn't all based in Paul Klein's theory or Raul or anything like that. I mean, this is all what's in. You can Google it and you can study this stuff yourself. It's all based in what's called behavioral economics. And there's lots of great books out there that I've mentioned on my podcast by a lot of great authors and pricing experts and so forth. So it's definitely some science to it, besides just a bunch of woo-woo from Paul and Raul here.
No, true. And also a lot of psychology too. But Paul, I want to ask you some questions, and I guess from real world experience, either with clients or observations that I've seen. And I would love to get your feedback on that for our audience. I think the first is, let's say you're in an industry and there might be a price cap or price ceiling that you're either seeing or getting from market feedback. That let's put the antidote on the side, saying that the marketing might be bringing that type of clientele who gives you that price ceiling. But what would you say to those entrepreneurs who are looking at their pricing model and saying, I'd like to price according to the value that I give, and the value is definitely there. Like we're doing, our price point is minuscule compared to the actual volume that we're delivering to clients, but the industry itself might have in itself a unspoken price ceiling. How do you position yourself out of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a couple different ways. I mean, one of the things I look at, when people ask that type of a question is if you're just viewed as a set of hands, a doer, you're not much different than a employee. Mm-hmm. And so if you've positioned your consultancy where you're being hired to come in, work a few hours, bang out some code or bang out some logos, you're just basically a hired set of hands. There's definitely a market cap there. But do you think someone like Seth Godin could come into an organization and provide some strategy for that same type of a vertical, whether you're a marketer or a web person or something like that? Absolutely, because they know, and I mean, obviously he's really, he's off the charts when it comes to this. But my point is that they're viewing Seth how we want to be viewed, not Seth Godin, but I mean more as a strategist, as someone who's being paid for their know-how as opposed to just a set of tasks and hands. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing you got to recognize too, and that's where I was going, is that your particular vertical may have an absolute cap for that particular type of services. So I was working with a client the other day that had a, she was more in the brick and mortar. She was doing online, but she was getting ready to do brick and mortar. And what was it? It wasn't donuts, but it was something, pastries or some kind of a food product. And everything in her area region was all, basically same thing. They were all competing on price. And so what I encouraged her to do, and you can do this in a consultancy, a knowledge worker can do this too. And that is sell more of an experience, and you and I've been talking about doing some workshops. Okay. You could certainly hire you or I for our expertise and, an hourly or a coaching kind of an arrangement or something like that, or consulting and so forth. But you can also set up experiences. People, it's just like when people go to Disneyland with their 10-year-old, that's why they pay, $150 for the fast pass. It's their 10-year-old's only gonna be 10 years once. So it's that experience they're paying for. They could go to the carnival in front of Kmart or Walmart or whatever, but it's not the same as going to Disneyland in Orlando. And so that's why they pay those premiums. And so looking at those other ways, these can be lots of different ways, not just experiences, but just other value adds. And a lot of times those are value adds that you would probably be doing anyway, but you're not taking credit for them. And that's another missed opportunity is Blair Enns talks a lot about guarantees. And so we all probably guarantee our work. So that's another way. You and I talked about carving up some different options with one of your clients. And that's where you have a, like direct access, whether they get your cell number or not, whether they get personal phone calls every week, there's all those different value adds that you can add to that to help increase that value that maybe other people in your market segment or that vertical isn't necessarily doing. And so you've got to look at those other out of the box things that you can put in there to increase your value. Have you ever heard the book, Breaking the Time Barrier? It's the CEO from FreshBooks, Mike McDonald.
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay. So it's a quick read. Read it. Anybody who's listening and likes pricing. It's an older book, came out in 2015, but there's a story in there about, a dog catcher. I'm sorry, not a dog catcher, a dog walker. And it was a commodity. It was like, she was, struggling to keep her doors opening and so forth. So what she did is she shifted from just being a dog walker to, I'm going to come up with a nutrition plan. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to have them around other types of dogs that will enhance their social. She really went from a, $10 an hour thing to like $50, $150 session kind of thing, because she was able to position, and we're talking about walking dogs. So if we can do it in those types of examples, when it comes into knowledge work, you can do the same thing. You just have to look for those out of the box value adds that you can add in your vertical that your competition is not doing.
And this is where we can get creative. And that's what I love about this, is because identifying the clear value, how can we help the most, and how can we get creative with our pricing? Because pricing is not black and white. However, it's not difficult. But I remember even back in my marketing courses in college is that once you set the price, if everyone knows that price and you start either lowering or increasing, it's going to be a little bit difficult to justify that if there's no clear explanation. So having these value adds or knowledge or like different positioning and strategies to be able to have that perceived higher value is going to help you if you do change your pricing or when you do change your pricing. You alluded to it earlier, and I really want to understand this. So we talked about, like, if you're either a hired work of hands or you're a service, is the next ascension to be more of a knowledge expert and getting the leverage from your strategy and your expertise? Is that how the ascension goes from products or services to product to a knowledge expert?
Yeah, I mean, it's more, I look at it more as like doing advisory or consulting work as opposed to doing marketing. And, there's two types of things. Here's a good example. There's kind of three. There's one situation where, and I got this from my friend Mike Kim, where you drive the car, I'll sit shotgun and show you where we go. there's another one where I drive the car, you sit shotgun. And then there's another one where you drive the car and I'll sit in the back seat, and kind of tell you where to go. So it's kind of those three different levels, but the main idea is that it really is that it's, you want to find people that have more time than money, or organizations that have more time than money that your specific niche or expertise can solve. And then positioning yourself to be paid for advisory or strategery from Mr. Bush, strategy work, because that commands a much higher rate than because you can find people on Upwork. You can find a doer just about anywhere. You can hire an employee, sub consultants, do that all day. But if you really want to position yourself for those higher rates, you've got to move more into I keep wanting to say strategy now, strategy and advisory. And that's a really great right now. I mean, everybody's so much more. I've been doing it since 2009, and what I call remote advisory work. And it's now that one of the blessings of COVID, if there is one, is that there's more organizations and people doing what we're doing right now, Raul, and that is conversing and meeting on Zoom. And so I do that a lot where people will come on Zoom and we'll have a strategy session or an advisory session on a very complex problem or topic, and that really helps you move away from just being hired as a set of hands or a set of tasks and, viewed more like an employee.
So I think it's, again, going back to like the mindset of the direction that you want in your company. So for our listeners out there to know, what is the direction that you're going? What's the actual overall mission and vision that you have for the company, and how you can position yourself as a strategist or an advisor, if that falls in line with that. And with when you do this, being able to price accordingly and understand how this can play a huge portion of revenue for your company, if not all the revenue, if that's what you decide to position and focus on.
Yes, absolutely. And we kind of skipped over it a minute ago, Raul, and I know you probably have another question coming up, but I really want to go back on the other thing when we talked about looking at other value adds. The other thing I wanted to point out, I want to give you and all your listeners permission. You do not have to follow industry norms, industry accepted practices or best practices. Flip those things on the head. Be the Steve Jobs of your industry. Throw in the workshop. Here's another really basic, super simple example. My wife cut hair for many years in the home so she could stay home with the kids and work around their schedule with classes. 3 kids, it was a deal. But she would have clients in her home salon come in, and it was a single salon. She provided a very great custom, experience. And some of her clients would have cheese and wine sitting on the thing when they got there. You can't get that at Supercuts. You can't get that at the local salon. So again, and I think technically it was probably illegal in California under the barbering bar, but it was pushing those envelopes and looking for those additional value adds that allowed her to charge, $350 for a, $125 color or whatever it was. So
it's the experience that matters. And I love that you mentioned that, because I interviewed Zeb Evans, the founder of ClickUp, on the podcast, and he was like, the ClickUp right now is worth $1 billion as a company, but early on when they were growing, he said that he kind of flipped all the development best practices, like very strict Scrum, on its head. And he increased efficiency in his industry to not only have like what would take 50 engineers, and his team would take 1 engineer. Yeah. So the fact that you just mentioned that whatever industry norm is being followed as the norm, there are ethical, correct ways that you can just scratch that and do what works best for your goals, and you can grow more profitably, grow faster, and be able to differentiate. And just because it's a norm doesn't mean it has to stay a norm.
Right. Yeah. Everybody says, oh, that's best practices, or that's just the way we've always done it. It's like, no, flip it on the head. And that's where I've had some of my biggest successes. I can't remember which book it was, but you want to be an industry or a vertical disruptor when it comes to that value that you're adding to that client base, that really will set you out. I mean, sometimes in some verticals, it's just a matter of calling people back, and I know you're younger than me, Raul, and I'm not picking on your generation or anybody else's. I know that's kind of what a lot of people do, but with technology, we're all so technology based, texting, email, we've lost a lot of that human connection. So I find to this day in my consultancy, I will call people back and they're like, oh, wow, you're the first, consultant to call me back. Thanks. They're like surprised. And I'm like, well, that's just what I do and how I run my business. So sometimes it's just that simple that will set you apart.
Setting apart. Well, Paul, I have one final question. This one's interesting because this one set you apart. So I once picked up a guitar to play like Joe Satriani and Eddie Van Halen, and
nice.
Rest in peace, Eddie. I didn't get to like the full 5-minute songs of Joe because like that guy's got the switchboard like I've never seen before. But you had your role in rock and roll, and like how did you transition from that rock and roll hair band, amazing stuff, all the way to what you're doing today? That's a phenomenal story.
Well, I'm a little bit ahead of you in age. So I'm a little over 50, but yeah, no, I mean, 16, growing up in the mid 80s, early 80s, Motley Crue, Poison, Guns N' Roses. I mean, I was down on the strip watching those guys. I saw those guys before they even got signed and trying to do the same thing. I was playing in bands, but I was always the guy that like was the manager I was the guitar player, but I was always the guy that went and got the gigs, managed the money, did the marketing. And so all the business principles, I was 16 and I threw like our first concert in our town. It was called Heavy Metal Theater, 1986. And we had like 900 people come, and I made like, I don't know, $2,000. I was like, man, I like this entrepreneurial thing. So that just set me on the path. And then, went into construction and then worked for, I got the government job, or the responsible day job that you're supposed to get. I was supposed to stay there till I was 55 and retire. And at 40, I was like, I was just burnt out. I was at the top of my position, making about $150,000 a year with full medical benefits in my hometown. And I said, I can't do this. And my wife's like, you're miserable, just quit, but don't tell me. And so I started side gigging on the side, and I realized I was an entrepreneur stuck in a bureaucracy in an organization. So I just started moonlighting on the side and getting consultants, tapping my network. And finally one day I quit and I didn't tell my wife. And she's like, it was like Friday or Saturday. And my wife's like, hey, on Monday, I have a doctor's appointment. You think you can pick up the kids and get off work early? And I'm like, well, I can get off early whenever you want now, because I'm free. And W9, K1 since then started 3 businesses, and I just love it. And any of you young people out there that don't think you can do this, you can do it. We all just figure it out. I'm still figuring it out as I'm going right now. I'm just a little older and, have a few more scars, but man, jump in the game. If something doesn't work, tweak, move, keep putting in the work, and you can have a great business and do good work, as Raul says in the name of the show here. So it'll all come back to you.
I appreciate that, Paul. That's awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you so much. And we'll have, for everyone listening on the podcast, what's the best place for them to go to learn more about what you're up to and to just thank you for this?
Yeah. Best place is at paulklein.net, or if you're listening to this show right now, just go down to your podcast player that you're in and search for the Pricing is Positioning podcast, hit subscribe, and you'll get updates, and shoot me an email and, or text or whatever. I'm on Instagram and all those places. So love to hear from you. Love to hear your story and what you're cooking with. Cause I just get encouraged when I see people doing great work, and the entrepreneur spirit is alive and well, and love it.
I'll link your show on the show notes. Definitely encourage anyone to listen to that podcast. You drop a lot of value in every episode. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.